I actually have a fun real life anecdote, Roxanne, that I don't think anyone's told you about this, because I was like, do not distract Roxanne with this. I'm going to tell you.
Usually bad stories, so I'm curious where this is going.
I'm going to tell you now. We're going to have a live reaction. If we don't like it, cut it. We had someone give us a Glassdoor review, and they were livid. They were livid. And one of the reasons they were livid, Roxanne, was because of you.
Hi, folks. I am super excited for you to listen to today's episode. This was just a personal highlight of mine. So Melanie and I have a conversation with Ashley Hurd. She is the founder and CEO of Manager Method, a former lawyer turned people leader turned manager trainer. And we talked through a lot of things, including the dynamic between employees and companies right now, especially as perks and have been rolled back and there's been layoffs. But then we end up in a just hilarious detour where Melanie shares live, where I get to learn live about a negative Glassdoor review that Athena received, me in particular. And Ashley and Melanie and I kind of unpack it, what it really says about power dynamics and how you can be thoughtful in some tricky situations. So I hope you enjoy it at my expense. And while I've got you, just want to shout out Athena, the company that Melanie and I work for. We provide thoughtful compliance training as well as a host of other tools that your company may need. Please send your legal or people leaders to check Athena out. We've got Ashley Hurd joining me and Melanie today, the founder of Manager Method, which does incredible training, not surprisingly, for managers. Well named, Ashley. But before that, a lawyer turned people person, which I feel like is a niche group. They're definitely out there. And so you bring the perspective of both, at least having some, deep understanding of the law, but also of people as humans, which is just a nice little Venn diagram. And also you're an avid golfer / both comedy and the place that people sing concerts person.
Yeah, that's it. It's me in a nutshell, literally.
Yeah. Oh, and you worked at KFC?
Worked at KFC. I worked as a lawyer for KFC, but I also actually worked in the drive-thru because at Yum we went into restaurants to live the experience, and I always have more respect. I'd have to close my eyes to try to listen to the drive-thru orders, and it was really a strong skill set, and it was great to see everything in action.
I was really interested to dig in with this. I love always having a CEO and an HR person because you're going to get maybe different responses, but maybe not. Sometimes you surprise us. And so one of the things that we've been thinking about a lot is sort of the balance between employee perks and benefits and performance at the company, and how much does one impact the other. And you and I, Ashley, were having an interesting conversation the other day around, it's an employer market right now, but that's not the way it's going to be forever. I'm curious to jump right in and get your take. Do you think that employers who are currently pulling back or sort of reining back perks and benefits right now because they have power, because it's an employer market, do you think they're going to struggle when the pendulum swings over back into employee market land?
I do think employees do pay attention, and they pay attention what happens in good times and in bad. And in good times, it can be an easy time for employees to be race to the top. Like, what are more benefits, and more to benefits? And sometimes employers, to their detriment, they match that. And they're like, oh, great. Wait, they're offering, I would see that in the law firm environment. Like, we'll offer, we'll jump to this salary, or you're offering 4 months paid maternity leave. We'll offer 6 months paid maternity leave, and we'll make it parental leave, and all of these things. And it's fine and good. And then all of a sudden the bad times happen and the profits aren't coming in, the revenues aren't coming in. And so you're seeing employers saying, okay, well, the top line isn't as much, so we're going to have to cut something. What is that going to look like? And if you just cut them, my gap is I think a lot of organizations just flat out cut them and kind of creep them back and try to do it quietly so people don't notice. And that's what I see. And that's where I see things go viral on social media. But I think employers that look at it and they recognize and say, okay, it's either going to be a choice of bodies. We're going to have to cut people and headcount, or real people with real lives, as I like to call it instead, or we're going to have to trim back the benefits a bit. And so I think if you can do the latter, and you say, this is what we're doing, this is what we can realistically do, we're going to trim these back, but we're going to do that so we can keep more people in seat, I think you're in a better position. But the biggest gap of all, and this is what I've seen on social media in particular, is the comments of people immediately that say, okay, but tell me what the leaders at the top are sacrificing. Because what most people believe, because they don't hear otherwise, is that the CEO at the top, you're getting the same amount of money coming in or more, especially in the stock organizations, if you're doing things to boost the stock. And they're like, you aren't suffering at all. And so the biggest piece of all to me is for the leaders to show that if things are being cut from employees, it's really important to show what you're doing as well personally. And it's a choice whether you do that or not. But if you do, I think that you earn a lot more goodwill than if you just do it or try to sneak it in.
Okay, I have like disjointed thoughts that I'll just toss out for us to chew on if they're helpful. Okay, so on starting with your last point on, like call it class warfare within companies, which I think you typically see at larger organizations, like a massive company where, there's been a riff and then, it gets announced in the Wall Street Journal that the CEO had a $33 million pay package or, stuff like that. I don't, this is probably not like maybe the most popular opinion, but I think in general, I'm kind of like, if you want to be a CEO, go be a CEO. And if we see this on a smaller scale, like I think in tech companies, you might see like a riff, like why do the engineers get X? Why do the salespeople get Y? And I'm generally, Melanie, you could tell me if you'd agree, like just deeply unsympathetic to any of those arguments because I'm kind of like, I don't know, did you study CS? Would you like to go? Like, we all make choices and they have sort of like pros and cons. And I think that like a company isn't responsible for an individual's choices and like sort of some like level playing field that disregards like what the market values. Again, I know this is like not like me like winning a popularity contest, but just being like pretty honest of like I'm usually and so like I then think about like the leadership tradition that I was brought up in was the army, and it has all these phrases that are kind of corny, but I think like in the army you generally see a lot of people really live them, like leaders eat last, so like the leadership tradition I saw was that leaders are like leading from the front. And so like that would mean that in some champagne problem world that I would love to live in, where I have a $33 million pay package, but I need to do a riff, I would always want to think about like, am I still living that value? It's not going to be the same as the army because the army, has like a really compressed and totally transparent pay scale and like all of those things. But it's not, I guess, long-winded way of saying it's not to my taste. I wouldn't be like, haha, from my yacht. Kind of a thing. But I think that fighting capitalism is generally like a pretty losing battle.
I actually think your viewpoint is really important, Roxanne. And there are people that will hear that think that is exactly how I expect CEOs to think.
We're
but
bad.
Yeah, and then like you just view, and like you view people like as a joke, not joke, but as FTEs on a spreadsheet. But in part, I do think as I've advanced in my career and have, whether sitting through executive, private equity boardrooms and otherwise, the realities are at a certain level, you have to think like that, because if you didn't, you'd almost be paralyzed with being unable to make decisions. And I imagine there's a lot of there's stress involved in like, how am I going to keep all of these jobs afloat that are depending on me? And you almost have to focus on numbers more than you do the people behind them.
I think I had to make a hard decision with a hard conversation last week, for example, which happens like all the time. And in doing so, I kind of like said this and like, human, I get it. And this sucks. And I don't like any part of it. CEO, like my job is to allocate resources to like where they need to be, where they're going to be the most impactful. And sometimes that's an amazing win. Melanie, I need you to go do this thing. You're like, oh, I was hoping to do this thing. Like, great. Like, boy, like we just had this amazing win where like you get to stretch yourself in a direction you were already hoping to go and the needs of the business align there. And then just as often, it is a situation of like, I have a need over here and either someone's skill set isn't suited for it or they don't want to go do it. And I think like really effective leaders in the business world, like in a capitalist structure, kind of, I would never want to work for a deeply empathetic leader. I know that's like a hot take, but I think it would just be like really hard to be effective. That's
I
spice.
1,000% agree. Without using names, at a former company, my manager was incredibly empathetic to the point where they could not hold people accountable because they didn't want to let them go. And every time we talked about performance, because I was always pushing for high performance at this company.
So unlike you, Melanie. Very out of character.
So unlike me, I really can be a hard ass sometimes. And this person would always say, "Empathy, Melanie, empathy," and I'd say, what empathy?" And they would tell me, they're having a really hard time, or they're not as motivated, or like they've been in this for like 20 years. It's hard to like keep it going, or their family. Well, and I know it sounds like an asshole thing to say, but the reality is, I get all of that, and also, we're paying for a service, right? Like, this isn't a charity. And so, like, I totally get it, right? Like, if this is not the right role for you at this time, if you need to take a step back from work, that's fine. Like, let's talk about it. But if you're going to be in your seat doing the job and receiving that paycheck, I do think that you have a responsibility to do the work. I think sometimes it's easier to think about it in terms of like a plumber. Like, if a plumber was like, "Hey, sorry, I can't come in today because I had this thing, but I still expect you to pay me," you wouldn't pay them, right? You'd say like, "Hey, sorry, come back when you're ready and I'll pay you then." And I know that sounds so horrible, but the reality is that when you don't hold those people accountable, that work doesn't just disappear. Somebody else has to do that work. And so all your high performers who are then picking up the slack, they're the ones that get burnt out, and then they're the ones that leave. And again, I'm not saying that you have to like fire someone, but I do think you need to have that conversation. And if you can't because you're too empathetic, I think it's deeply demoralizing for everyone else across the company.
Ashley, have we gone off the deep end? Do you think we're too FTEs on a spreadsheet?
No, and part of my experience is that before I went to law school, I worked in corporate sales. I worked for a public company, cold calling CFOs, and I had been a liberal
doing the Lord's work.
Well, that's one thing. getting hung up on, and other things.
Yeah.
It was a blast. But I do think the gap that I see is exactly that, is empathy that does not include clarity and doesn't think about the holistic picture. And I think the skill set that so many managers need that do not have is they fall into that trap where they're so empathetic, like they're, kind, and that because they don't want to feel badly. They have that very human need to be liked. And then all of a sudden they look around and they're being called to account by their boss. And instead of saying, "Oh, shoot, I should have had this conversation," they put all the blame on the team member and say, "We're going to make a change here. I'll take care of this." And they put all the blame there. And then they have that, "We're going to immediately need to make a change." And that's it. And so they go from being one side of the pendulum, which is, kind, this is fine, take all the time. Then all of a sudden they come back and say, "This isn't working out. We need to make a change." And to an employee, that rightly feels incredibly cruel because you feel like you have this, soft blanket, do what you need. And then all of a sudden your job's being removed and there has been nothing in between. And so a lot of what I do in my work is because I saw that turn into very real legal claims, sometimes successfully, because it just seemed to come out of nowhere. And that doesn't tend to work out well for anyone. But is to teach managers how part of empathy is being clear and talking about from the get-go why your role matters. Because that's one of the gaps, is frequently managers would say, why are they doing this? Why aren't they coming to work? Why are they calling out? Why can't they just do their job? And part of it I'd say is like, well, there's a reason you're in your role and you've been promoted into your role and you're going to work with all sorts of people, some of which are your favorite people, some of which aren't. But your job is to figure that out and vary those conversations to try to at least give them a shot, because they are a human. I do think, to Roxanne, your point of like companies, they don't control and are not responsible for an individual's choices. I disagree a bit in that I think there used to be a real, even as part of capitalism, there was the socialist aspect of it, that there was at least this contract, whether it's like the 40-hour work week and a pension, there just was this expectation. And how that played out for real life. Like when I was a kid, I would go on vacation. We would take a vacation. My parents would be there present. Nobody would be on their phones. There weren't phones. And work wasn't coming in. There were real separations, and some of it out of necessity because it just wasn't, the technology wasn't there. But so the technology coming in has been absolutely a benefit to employers to be able to get more out of their team members. Yeah. But I do think it's withered away this this aspect of people's real lives. And so I think a lot of people now feel like their whole personality and life is work, and they're not getting things in return. And so I think maybe it's not a company's responsibility for an employee's choices, but I think companies that try to do the most for their team members, communicate why the job matters. We are here to do a job, but we also want you to be able to live a full life outside of work. The companies that make that choice and figure out what that looks like, I do think win over time in the retention and engagement that I had talked about previously.
Roxanne, I think you are correct that people chose this life. It's a different level of privilege. It is what it is. And also, I think to Ashley's point, I don't know that Ashley is saying, I don't know, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but when I hear what Ashley says, I don't see that and hear that as disagreement with you. What I hear is like, yeah, that is the state of the world. And also, if you want to get the most out of your employees within this context,
Totally.
there's a motivational way to do it, and there's a scary, demoralizing way to do it.
That I completely buy.
Yeah. And for me, I think you and I talked about this once, right? Like there are the Elon Musks of the world who are loudly Elon Musk, and people want to work at his companies because they like that culture. They wear it like a
They've
badge.
opted into it.
They've
Yep.
opted into it. And I think for other companies, right, they might then choose that their path to success is we're going to proactively say, this is our culture. If you like it, sign up. If you don't sign up. And then if you do join because you like it, this is the culture we're going to maintain to keep you motivated. We're going to be clear with you, direct with you. I actually have a fun real life anecdote, Roxanne, that I don't think anyone's told you about this, because I was like, do not distract Roxanne with this. I'm going to tell you.
Usually bad stories, so I'm curious where this is going.
I'm going to tell you now. We're going to have a live reaction. If we don't like it, cut it. We had someone give us a Glassdoor review, and they were livid. They were livid. And one of the reasons they were livid, Roxanne, was because of you. And it was because you had the audacity to come to their interview on your walking treadmill. And they thought that was so offensive and that you weren't taking it seriously. And my team was like, what do we do? Should we give Roxanne the feedback? Oh my gosh, like, is this terrible? We should have disclaimed it's not personal. It's part of our culture. And I said, absolutely not. Absolutely not, because that is our culture. And if you are offended by Roxanne walking on a treadmill during your interview, two things. First of all, this is not the right culture for you. I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry. Second of all, I want candidates that assume good intent and lean into curiosity. And so at a minimum, I would have wanted them to say, wow, that's really cool that she's on a treadmill. I bet I can come on a treadmill to my next interview. Let me ask about it. Or, I've never seen that before. Interesting. My last company never would have tolerated that. I'm just going to ask, hey, I see you're on a treadmill. That took me by surprise. Tell me more. Is that the norm at your company? But no, this person said nothing and then went on Glassdoor and shared how horrible and disastrous the interview was because you
Ashley,
were on a
coach me.
treadmill.
What do you think? What should I do in this situation? I should obviously go on Glassdoor and respond in a pretty aggressive way, right?
You should.
step one.
You should.
And
You
include
should.
a GIF of you on a treadmill, please.
Yeah, totally. We can set that up. No, I think it's I agree that like I don't like and that's one of the things I often encourage organizations, and when I do manager trainings, oftentimes I'll get their Glassdoor and I'll give real examples and we'll talk about them, and it's important. And I say again, having lived in the world where I look at Glassdoor reviews and sometimes you're like, gosh, that's a really common theme. Like maybe it's not great to hear, but that is true. Other times you see it and you're like, there's more to the story. Okay, but in this situation, the one thing I'd say to that is if there wasn't a conversation about it, as there's a power dynamic when you're a CEO, and so
100%.
it can be natural for that
interviewing,
for
right?
that,
as a
yeah,
candidate,
of course. It's like a reality show. You're trying to win the competition, and so someone's probably not going to ask a question about that, and they may have those thoughts and have all of those thoughts to think, okay, are they, is this a disrespect? Is that they're not taking it seriously, or is it not? And I agree that assuming good intent, having the conversation, I also understand why someone might not ask that. That may show very clearly that's not the right person to work at Athena, because you're looking for people that are willing to challenge it. But sometimes people haven't had that culture. And so the one thing I often encourage is like to proactively. So the only thing I'd say, Roxanne, is just when you're doing that to say, like, I'm here on my walking treadmill. Like, I take this interview very seriously. We also encourage here at Athena to like fit things in. And so I am focusing solely on you. So I hope you're not put off by this, but that's part of our culture here. And I think in that like 15 seconds or whatever can probably assuage with some of the feelings the person may have had and provide that level of reassurance. And I can also see you might be like, that should absolutely not be necessary. But I think from the human lens of someone coming in and not knowing that, proactively as a leader, addressing that and giving that encouraging thing can flip how they view the culture. And if at that point they still are like, well, I don't like that. Well, that's absolutely not the right organization. But that's the one thing from a power dynamic. People, especially on that candidate aspect, and some of your best candidates, because I think to the point of being like, Roxanne's, I actually think this is a really great example in real life. The questions are, do you walk on the treadmill? Do you say something about it? And while those can seem like basic things, I do think that they have like bigger implications. And I'm totally for it. And I probably agree with you on the client aspect, because I think it can feel, it's like anything that's different can feel odd. Now
it's like coming, with a t-shirt, and I try to come, if I have external calls, come looking not like a total disaster, even if my son did throw up this morning. Yeah, like I get the idea of respect, right? Like my husband wears a suit to work. This is part of like the culture he works in. Like, so I'm not dismissing optics. I think here I'm just saying like, man, I don't know. Otherwise she's showing me,
No, I think we're all aligned that like there's nothing wrong with you being on the walking treadmill. I think, yeah.
There might be something wrong with me.
No, I actually think the question is, should we proactively flag this out of respect and to set the tone and make that clear, or do we use this as a litmus test? And I was leaning more towards we use this as a litmus test. And Ashley, I think what you're saying is like maybe unnecessary, like maybe set them up for better success by saying something.
I think we use the interview as the litmus test, right? The interview is what.
But we have different things throughout the interview that are different litmus tests. But you're right. This maybe doesn't need to be another one.
Well, I think people like, have you ever heard of these stories? Actually, I feel like McKinsey, I would sometimes hear, but I feel like this secretary was in on the interview process, and like someone comes in for a senior role and like they're rude to the secretary and then they don't get the job. And like, I don't know what I think about that.
I think the question for me is, would the kinds of candidates that we are optimizing for and that we ultimately want to hire, would this behavior without, the caveat scare them away? And if the answer is yes, or give them a bad taste in their mouth or whatever. If the answer is yes, absolutely. If the answer is no, up to you. But it also seems like you personally don't want to do this without giving the disclaimer. So I think we have our answer. You're going to start giving a disclaimer moving forward. Solved.
Moving forward at a leisurely pace.
We're going to respond to the Glassdoor. We're going to respond to the Glassdoor interview and let them know.
Just say, come interview again.
Yes.
My guess is that person probably, you don't want them to interview again, but come interview again, everyone. If you see this, you can just record the disclaimer in advance and just press a button for it.
There you go. It's my like avatar. It's kind of a spicy question to end on, but I think it could be kind of interesting. So we were talking in a prep call about some stat that I still have not fact checked, but we all agreed it seemed like plus or minus correct, that HR is either produces the lowest or among the lowest pathways into CEO, that it's like pretty rare to have a people leader turned CEO. And just curious, like, what's your take on that? And do you think it's a problem to be solved, or it's just like to the kind of earlier discussion we were having on like, hey, we all make choices and, there's like, this isn't actually a problem. Like, where do you come down?
I think I think the problem isn't just the stat of not enough people leaders go into CEOs. I think part of the reasoning behind it, and candidly, part of it, I do think, is that HR people teams, they tend to be one of the very few corporate functions that tends to have a female at its helm, and statistically, for whatever reasons, females tend to be less in the CEO suite. So I think it's just.
Do you think women have now eclipsed CEOs named John? I think it's like, it depends on if you include like John Pauls or Johns as to whether you tip it over. But Ashley, let us not overlook the progress.
No, I celebrate all wins. I do. But I do think that's part of it. I think it's sometimes if I were to say to someone, close your eyes and imagine a CEO, you're probably going to envision a white male in a suit with white hair. And I think that's
walking on that treadmill.
Not walking on the treadmill, like weightlifting, on the golf course, maybe on the golf course. But I think so I do think there's actually this like still perception, and I think boards, as they think about it, there still is just this bias. But to the idea of it, I think that in the people function, when you have a strategic people leader that recognizes that, especially in this age of so many technological advances, a lot of the value and differentiator like is going to be the people that you have there and the ideas that they have and the ways that they communicate and connect with others. And so I think when you have that skill set and elevate that to the top of the org chart, I think as opposed to just being a problem that they're not there, I think it's a real strength when you can bring that and have an HR leader that understands the financial chops. They understand risk management, and they're not just this, empathetic leader that's like, be nice to everybody. And so I yesterday was watching an Instagram video of Lena Nair, who's the CEO of Chanel. She had come up through Unilever in HR. She was in learning and development. She was the CHRO of Unilever. And in this video, and I had forgotten that she came up from HR. I was just watching it. But she was saying, I know the names of all, 20, 30,000 employees. I mean, candidly to that, I'm like, oh, I'd love to see a test. I'd love to see a test for that. But the way she talked about it was that she gets to know the people behind the business. And I do think so many people are craving that in the workplace, to feel like they matter. And so I think that alone was a really good example. And then I was like, oh, I forgot her Instagram handle has HR at the end of it. And I was like, wait, didn't she come up through HR? And so of course I ran to her LinkedIn and confirmed that. But so I just think this aspect of being a CEO and recognizing that people matter and making people feel heard, it impacts how long people want to stay and how people work for you. And so I do think there are benefits to that can come through the HR function.
I don't disagree. I think I'm somewhere in the middle. I think that you are correct that that it can and does make a difference for many people, and you will get more out of people. I feel it personally, right? The more I feel valued and supported and seen, the more I want to give to a company. And I think where things get tricky is that, unfortunately, that doesn't work for everyone. And sometimes you get burned, and sometimes it doesn't matter what you do. The employee's still going to, at the end of the day, do what's best for them, as they should, for the record, right? And I think what can happen is that very quickly that can turn people cynical. And so I think it's all, I think it's a bit of, I don't want to say it's a gamble, but I think it's got to be a calculated, it's a bit of a calculated risk, and knowing that it's not going to be 100% success rate, but it's going to be a meaningful enough success rate that I agree with you. It is worth the effort to invest in your people and really think about how you're motivating them, and empowering them for success, versus being like, screw you, it's just a contract. I only want to know you as a number on the dotted line.
Yeah, I mean, I think great leaders, like I think back to the Army, and it's like couple of great senior officers I'd seen who like always deeply knew what motivated their lieutenants or their, people right under them. And not surprisingly, it was always a little different, right? Like, I don't know, Melanie might be like hyper ambitious and she's motivated by like, whatever, like hard challenges. And Ashley maybe like, they learn that like, okay, this is like you tick in a different way. And so they like really do modulate, even in a world that I think can be caricatured as like hyper uniform, hierarchical, just like shut up and do your job. I saw like real tailoring of leadership styles to personality types, which I think is always the best way to lead, right? Because it's like, you're not leading a number on a spreadsheet, like you're leading a human. And people, I mean, I think we've all felt this, can give varying degrees of themselves to work. Like I have absolutely checked out at places and I was like not a very productive number on a spreadsheet. Guys, I have like multiple interviews this afternoon and I am going to give a caveat. And Ashley, I want you to watch Glassdoor like a hawk. And if I still get lit up, we'll know what happened. But this was just so fun, Ashley. Thank you for bringing like such thoughtful perspectives to this conversation.
I appreciate it. I think it's really helpful to see. First of all, I love your interactions. I'm assuming most of you listening follow both Melanie and Roxanne on LinkedIn, but I love the engagement back and forth. Rarely will you see that, especially in a public forum, about how you make decisions and your employees. And so I think you do have this real culture of transparency, in addition to be an organization that's all about compliance. You do it. And so it's been awesome to see.
Ashley, thank you so much for joining us. I feel like you lend like such a thoughtful perspective to these conversations. I would love to chat with you all the time. Maybe we'll reach out next time we have a bad Glassdoor review, which who knows, might be tomorrow, today even. But thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you all so much for having me. I love listening in and getting to be part of it.
I've been waiting my whole life to say this. If you like this episode, please like, subscribe, and follow us on LinkedIn, because that's the only social media platform where we hang out.